You feel good?
And remarkably, the answer might actually be yes.
That's the goal. You might want to live long, but even more important, you want to live well.
I'm going to begin with a question. And I'd like to ask you, when was the last time you had a conversation that moved you? A conversation that made you think about your life or opened up new perspectives? And when was the last time someone really listened to you without interrupting or being distracted? I'm guessing it wasn't very recently. We live in an era of multitasking which is everywhere. Multitasking means multi-focus, and multi-focus means not much deep focus at all. It's an age of truncated communications, abbreviated texts, and curated images of ourselves so that we seem ideal rather than real. And meaningful conversation is becoming a rare animal. But why does that matter? I think we all know intuitively that it does matter. And we know that because of the way that we feel when we connect with someone, when someone really listens to us and gets us, and vice versa. It nourishes our heart, our intellect, and our spirit. And recent research bears this out. Last year, Matthias Meal and colleagues conducted some research that showed that people who had more meaningful conversations, as opposed to friendly social chit-chat, were happier. And the thing that was really surprising, and I'm sure some of you will be surprised, the researchers were surprised, is that held even for introverts. Even introverts were happier if they had more meaningful conversations. But increasingly, the way we live denies us the opportunities for deep conversation. We live in an age of speed and surfaces. The abundance, the incredible abundance of information and the shortage of time encourage skimming rather than digging. So a skimmer would look at a potato field in winter and see it as barren and empty. But a digger would discover that it was full of potatoes growing under the surface. But how do you initiate a deep conversation in this day and age? Today's conversations are constantly punctuated by phone checking and abbreviated to texts and sound bites. Emotions have become emojis. And we've all read about the digital plague that's overtaking our lives, and our inner lives, our emotional lives, are being held hostage to it. Well, Kerry and I created an antidote to that. We wanted to create a space where meaningful conversation, real conversation, could flourish. And so we created our salons. And they're a space where we have the space and the time and the people who are interested in listening to us to explore our own life stories and, really importantly, to hear about others' lives, which may be quite different from our own. We created discussion questions that encouraged people to travel through the narrative of their own lives. For example, to explore the internal compass that they may or may not have followed, the people who've influenced us, the choices, both intentional and forced choices that have shaped our lives, and the expected and the unexpected. All of those topics that we never have the chance to even sit down and think about, let alone talk about. Well, the salons have been consistently wonderful, extraordinarily wonderful. They're filled with stories that make us laugh, make us cry, astonish us, inspire us. And the stories are warts and all human. They're real. They're about failures as well as successes. They're about mistakes on the way to learning. We've all been nourished by those stories, but we've also learned about ourselves and about others. Because when you put your experiences into words, it helps you to see patterns and connections, to gain insight into the drivers and the themes of your own life. And the insights are often unexpected and really surprising. We thought we knew what this meant to us or why that happened, but in fact, when you actually begin to take out that story, you discover there's something much deeper going on. And very often too, the story that you hear from a stranger actually brings you yourself to a new perspective on something in your own life. And learning in this day and age is all too often thought of as acquiring information. We live in an era that values smarts, that values backdoor hacks, anything that speeds things up, and Googling as a way of acquiring knowledge. Wisdom is much less talked about. And wisdom is never fast, and it's rarely simple. And there are no shortcuts or hacks to the getting of wisdom. Wisdom requires reflection, and it also requires an ability to listen to the experience of other people and to think about it. And our age is not wisdom friendly, but our salons are. Our salons are full of wisdom, contained in the countless stories of how lives have been lived and distilled from experiences both similar to our own and also wildly different. And wisdom requires truth. Gilding your reality takes you away from wisdom, and we live in an age where gilding is everything. We Photoshop photos that we post. We do all kinds of things to gain likes. We've moved from beings who are real to each other, who live in villages, who thrive on face-to-face contact, who know each other, to beings who are hardwired to be social animals, are now beings who don't have face-to-face contact. We communicate through screens, both the physical screens of the computer and phone, but also the psychological screens of curated and unreal images of ourselves. Even voicemail is being dropped in favour of text. And technology is increasingly facilitating the avoidance of even voice-to-voice, let alone face-to-face. We live in an age of division and polarisation and disconnection, fake news and curated images. And in today's world, it seems more important than ever to find ways to cut through that. And face-to-face, genuine, meaningful conversation about our lives does that. And that's why Kerry and I wrote our book, The Sunday Story Club. And we really hope that you too will be able to run and experience the magic of your own salons and just hearing people's stories of their lives.
Oh, it's so hard waiting, isn't it? Now, Doris and I met, ironically, online. I'd started a blog which was focused on breaking stereotypes for women called Sibylesque, and Doris had written a memoir called The 12th Raven, and I reviewed her book on the blog and sent her a link, and she in turn asked me to the launch of her book, which meant I bought her book twice. We didn't have time to talk at the launch, so we arranged to get together at lunch. Now, Doris and I, as you will have noticed, are so different. Doris, the psychologist, author, poet. I'm the humorist, journalist, mathematician. But we were both sick of small talk. I mean, we live in Melbourne. Surely there is more to life than talking about football and the weather. So And even though, and we love stories, and even though we just met, we decided there and then to run a salon. Now, we wanted a formal structure, so we devised some questions, sent out invitations, and 12 women who'd never met before sat in Doris's lounge room looking at one another. And we wondered if strangers would talk. Well, they do with the right questions. And how those questions are phrased makes all the difference. I mean, strangers have told stories they've never told anyone else before. And listening to real stories about real lives, not the Facebook versions, is just so rewarding and refreshing. We wanted to avoid stereotypes, so we don't introduce ourselves in the salon by the standard line. You know, my name's Angie, I'm married with 2 children, blah, blah, blah. That closes people down. We ask salon attendees to introduce themselves by stating their first name and then answering a spontaneous icebreaker question. Here's one. Imagine the James Bond franchise has expanded to include Jane Bond. Imagine you are Jane Bond going on a mission. What one item from Cue would you requisition for your use? And here are some answers. I want an extendable hand so I can reach out and slap idiots. I think we could all use one of them. Here's another one. I want Bond, James Bond. And I don't think that was for his spying skills. But the salon has a formal structure. We send out 2 carefully crafted questions with a formal invitation. And the idea is to flag that this is no ordinary conversation that can easily run amok or degrade into a complaint fest. In the salon, the questions are unusual and quirky to encourage us to think outside the square. And they're also designed to sidestep the standard narratives or prepared narratives people have to explain their lives to themselves and others. We like the first question to be a light one and the second question to be deeper and more serious. But what we've found is you can't predict the outcome. Sometimes the lighter question provokes hilarious stories, provokes really intense stories, and the serious question, much funnier stories. The salon works so well, we wanted to share this experience. So we wrote the Sunday Story Club to tell you, to share not only some of the stories, but how to run your own salon, which has been just a great joy to all of us. Now, Doris has already talked about how difficult it is communicating today. Even in a face-to-face conversation, they may not be listening. You know what they're doing. Maybe you should text them. I'm talking to you, angry face emoji. And I have to say mea culpa, because when we were writing the book, Doris and I went out to interview salon members to write up a variety of stories. And we were at loggerheads. The problem was I was writing my articles like a journalist, facts, 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 non-emotive language. And Doris was trying to tell me something, but all I could hear was criticism. And I'm like, I've written for newspapers for 30 years, I've written 20 books, don't tell me how to write. And so Miss Sneaky here put a question in the next salon. What role has criticism played in your life? Yeah. Has criticism, either given or received, had a major impact on you? Now, in the salon, Doris answered the question by saying she'd had a number of editors over several books, and she was always appreciated the fact that someone had taken the time to read and think about her writing. If the criticism was constructive, that was a good thing. If she disagreed with the criticism, then putting into words why she disagreed was also helpful. Well, my response was totally different. I write humour, and I've had over 100 newspaper editors, and mostly I hate them. I'll tell you why. There's no discussion. They just chop out bits they don't want, publish the article, put your name on it, and they make me boring, you know. And here's typical criticism from a newspaper editor. He was a good one. I'd written many funny articles for him. I'd been, you know, the Aussie superhero, Redback Spider-Man, and an unemployed goddess. And when a magazine for dogs came out, like the Women's Weekly, but for dogs, with dog fashion, dog star signs, and celebrity dog photographs under the heading paparazzi, I decided to write a review as a dog. And his response was, no, not funny. So I emailed him back, woof, 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 woof. Nevertheless, a week after that salon, I rang Doris and said, I think we should be writing these stories more like short stories to put in the heart and the soul and the magic. And her response was, that's what I've been trying to tell you. And it was no light bulb moment for me, just a slow rethink. Or, Doris here is a hypnotherapist. She may have hypnotised me. So the glory of the salon is that we have to sit and listen. And it's easy to brush someone off in an everyday conversation, but in the salon we listen, and it works because it has a formal structure. I mean, we design the questions to open up a conversation that is non-judgmental and non-competitive. And salon members have often been surprised by others' reactions. One salon member told the story of travelling overseas with her daughter, and everyone said she was so brave. She was surprised. She was hitchhiking with a disabled daughter in a wheelchair. It's an amazing story. And sometimes salon members, or quite often really, take the questions home for all the family. And, children of all ages are fascinated. Now, I wish I had this concept available when my children were school age, especially for my son. He was a man of few words. I'd pick him up from primary school and ask, what'd you do at school today? Nothing. This went on for years. I concluded I'd take him to school, they drug him for 6 hours, and then I'd bring him home. In secondary school, he'd walk in the door hungry, and I'd ask, how was school today? And his reply would be, crap. And I can remember one time, his friend Alex rang, and I'm thinking, this is good, I'm going to learn something here, because in those days, the phone sat on the kitchen bench with a squiggly cord, the receiver. So in comes Mr. 12 years of age, picks up the receiver and says, and I'm thinking, I'm going to learn a lot, right? I'm going to learn a lot. And this is what happens. Right, and hung up. A one-word conversation. What is that? But, I could have opened up a more interesting conversation with the whole family by asking a more intriguing question like, if you could learn one thing from one person, real or imagined, who would you want to be your teacher and what would you want to learn? We find these salons to be so energising and uplifting. We have wrote the Sunday Story Club to share this experience. We're running a salon tomorrow at the Wellness Show at 12:45, and we would love you to come along and to hear your thoughts on this question. What's the worst advice you've ever been given? The answer can be long or short. Here's some bad advice I've received. That topic won't be on the exam. And so come along and see us at the salon tomorrow, or come and meet us now at the bookshop. We'd love to meet you. Oh, there we go.